How's it going, everyone? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Human Rights and Human Wrongs. And today, sadly, we have to discuss human trafficking. But I have a wonderful individual, well qualified, which I will let her introduce herself in a few, to discuss that subject today here. And I hope this could alert you, remind you, and spark a change, in the world. So how's it going? Thank you for coming.
Good morning. Thank you for
Nice
having
meeting
me.
you today.
Nice meeting you. I'm Jumorrow Johnson, and I'm currently the president of the Broward Human Trafficking Coalition, which is the lead agency in Broward County fighting to eradicate human trafficking. And I also currently serve as the victim advocate for the FAU Police Department.
That sounds great.
I'm very busy.
So where are you from originally?
I'm Floridian.
You're Floridian?
Born and raised, yes. Lived in Florida, well, all my life except when I left to go to school. But for the most part, I am a Florida girl. South Florida girl, love it.
It's all about Florida.
It is.
Do you like football?
College ball.
College ball?
Not an NFL fan.
Me too.
Not an NFL fan.
So what brought you here to FAU?
Well, what brought me here to FAU is that I was recruited here by the current chief of police, Chief Sean Bramer. I was currently serving as the victim advocate for Plantation Police Department prior to coming on to FAU as their victim advocate. And prior to that, I was with Department of Juvenile Justice doing probation and conditional release for about 15 years prior to that. So I've been doing this a long time.
So you have a lot of experience.
I have a lot of experience. I've worked on both spectrums. I've worked with the offenders and I work with the victims. So I'm able to see it from both sides, which gives me pretty much a great understanding of why people do the things they do and why they respond the way they respond to certain things.
That's pretty amazing, and it's amazing that you're tackling these issues. So what motivates you to, tackle these issues that are often hidden, from society? A lot of these things we don't know about.
Are you talking in particular about human trafficking?
Just particularly about everything that you're alerted of and being able to. For instance, when I went to the Thanksgiving Grub the other day, you was talking about, the victims of
domestic violence.
Yeah, exactly. So what makes you want to be in that field to help?
Well, first of all, I believe in humanity.
Yeah.
I believe that everyone has a right to life, and I believe everyone has a right to safety, regardless of how you feel about who this person is, what they look like, where they're from, or how they live their life. And so I believe in human rights, and I care about people, and I care about justice. And I know it comes in certain forms.
Yeah.
And I believe in victims having the ability to be made whole again. And I just think it's very important for people to understand that when someone is surviving something, surviving enough is not alone. People need to learn how to thrive after they've survived.
Right.
I think people have this mindset that once someone comes out of something, that they're okay. Not so. What do we do now? How do we help them now? How do we make them whole again? How do we keep them from falling back into the identity of a victim? So that's why I do what I do.
That's amazing. So you're a hero, local hero.
I wouldn't do that.
At Florida Atlantic University.
I just care about people.
I think we're all heroes. All right. So speaking of heroes, human trafficking. I've been seeing it a lot more in the news lately. It's just been popping up everywhere. People going missing, and it frightens me. And I'm wondering, why is there no one doing anything about this?
I'm gonna have to disagree with you on that. I don't. There's a lot being done with human trafficking, and the reason that you're seeing it so much now is because there is something being done. The reason that you're seeing these commercials, the reason that you're seeing these movies, the reason that so much legislation and laws are being passed is because people are doing something, they're saying something, and they're doing something. This has been going on for a long time now, and nothing was being done. That's why it's such a shocker now. This isn't new. It's been happening for years. It's been happening globally, worldwide for years, and nothing was being done. And so the reason that you're seeing it now and hearing about it now so often is because something is being done about it now, and there's an awareness and an education that is occurring now surrounding human trafficking, which is an amazing thing. And in order for you to tackle a problem, you have to first admit that you have one.
Yeah.
So there's a lot being done.
So it's just now coming to light, like a lot of the other issues.
Exactly.
So a lot of these problems are fundamentally system integrated into our systems for years, centuries, I think.
Right. Absolutely.
So what exactly is human trafficking?
Well, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked. Human trafficking is defined by the federal government as modern-day slavery.
Yeah.
It involves the buying and the selling of people for the purposes of sex or labor, and sometimes organ trafficking, and usually it involves some form of force, fraud, or coercion.
Mm-hmm. And what exactly leads to that? And how often does this occur, on a daily basis, on a monthly basis within our society?
Well, human trafficking occurs all the time,
yeah.
daily. If you're saying, well, how many people are being trafficked every day? There's no way to determine that. But it's happening all the time, every day, and it can happen to anyone. There's no profile, and this is something that's extremely important. There's no profile for a trafficking victim. Anyone can fall prey to a human trafficking victim. To a trafficker. Anybody can be a human trafficking victim. Right. It doesn't discriminate, and it's not just the myth that it's a foreign issue. It's a global problem. We have a huge problem domestically here in the United States with human trafficking.
So how significant is human trafficking in the United States?
Well, we have a huge problem here domestically. First of all, Florida is number 3 in the country for calls coming through the human trafficking hotline. And we are just behind California and Texas. So we are number 3. And so when you talk about how significant it is, it's so significant because what has happened is that in the beginning, you were hearing about all of the foreign victims that were coming over and all of the people that were being trafficked across the borders and things like that. And so what happened is that the traffickers learned very quickly that it's very easy to traffic someone that you already have access to. So if your product is already in arm's reach, why do you need the burden of going across waters? Or across country lines in order to bring people here. Not saying that we don't have an issue with foreign human trafficking, because we do. However, there is a significant issue here domestically within the United States of America. And the reason for that is there's a huge immigration problem here, with people needing work, no documents, willing to work for next if nothing, not being able to speak the language and things like that. But also, when I stated, before how Florida is number 3 in the country of calls coming through the hotline, you have to look at our geographical makeup and our demographic makeup of Florida. Mm-hmm. And our weather and how we're surrounded by bodies of water, and we're a tourist state, and we're known for picking season and all of these things. So we're hit with both sex and labor trafficking. So it's a significant problem domestically. It's not just a foreign issue.
So you stated a couple of southern states like Texas, Florida.
Well, California is number 1.
Texas
is number 2, and Florida is number 3. And the one thing that these states have in common is, first of all, they're very large. Mm-hmm. Secondly, they are border states. And thirdly, there is a huge diversity of people that live within all 3 of these states, from multiple different cultures that live in these different states. So that's the 3 main common goals that they have in common.
Okay. And you saying, so this occurs in our backyard pretty much, and so what I'm trying to say is this occurs pretty much not only throughout the whole year, but in these states, this is happening when your kid is probably coming from school or just hanging out with their friends in the curb or something.
That's correct. And the term that you just used, in our backyard, is very appropriate, because it is happening in our own backyard. American children are easier to traffic than foreign kids because they're already here. And younger children are easier to control, especially latchkey kids, especially kids that are being bullied. And people have this perception that children that are on runaway, that they are the most sought after children, while children that are on the streets and do run away are at greater risk. But traffickers now are focusing now on community kids. What's a community kid? A community kid is anybody's kid. A community kid is someone that has someone taking care of them, providing for them, a mother or father, lives in a community. And what traffickers are doing now is they're using that child's love and affection that they have for their family to hold them under their thumb. Because a child with nothing to lose is a lot harder to control than a child with so much to lose. And so it's harder to control people that have something to lose than it is to control a person that doesn't.
That's very
Makes sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm guessing with the idea that I could actually go overseas and what is it called again? When you take a kid and you make them your own.
Adopt,
right? So I can go overseas and adopt a child, right? And then I take them back to the States, and that as well could be, if I'm treating this child like a slave,
right?
Would that be considered the same thing?
Yeah, well, that can
Trafficking?
fall under, that falls under labor trafficking, or it falls under domestic servitude. There was a huge issue with that at one point, with the Haitian children from the earthquake.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with the term Restavik, but you had people that were bringing children from Haiti to the United States, and with these promises in mind. And then when the children got here, of course, their intentions were not pure, and you had children that were being trafficked, whether it was sex trafficking, labor trafficking. They were placed in situations of domestic servitude. And so yes, that happens all the time. That happens all the time.
Okay. And when these, I don't know what do you call somebody who does human trafficking?
A
trafficker. So let's suppose a trafficker would take a kid is coming from school, going to his house, just waiting for that lunch, and he or she grabs that kid. What usually happens next?
It doesn't always happen like that, though. It's very much more subtle.
Yeah.
And that's the picture that people have said, okay, the kid is coming home, the kid is being grabbed, and no. Yeah. Traffickers are very subtle.
Okay.
A lot of times they will groom their child. They will groom a child, much like a pedophile would.
Okay.
Use the grooming process. We'll befriend the child, find out what the child's likes are, find out what the child's strengths are. If the child is lacking in any area, if you're talking about a young girl, for instance, I'm just going to give you an example. If there's a lack of male presence in the house, he will become that security, that provider for that child, grooming that child into the position of feeling so grateful for what he's given, and then that child would be willing to do whatever this person wants them to do because they feel like they owe them something. That's where the coercion and the manipulation comes into place when you start talking about trafficking of young children. There's a lot of coercion, a lot of manipulation involved in that, especially when you're talking about community children. Because when you're grabbing kids, that you bring a lot of attention to yourself. You don't make any money that way. Human trafficking generates anywhere from $36 billion a year globally. You know what I'm saying? You're not making money that way. The demand is so high. The younger the child, the more money you can get for the child, because the Johns think the younger the child, the cleaner they are, because they haven't been on the streets that long. You know what I'm saying? So you don't make any money by snatching kids and then selling them. Not here in the United States. I mean, snatching kids and then sending them overseas, yeah. But snatching kids and selling them here in the United States, no. Not if you want to make money, because people are going to be looking for that child. You understand what I'm saying? So it's much more subtle than that. It's a very meticulous process. It's very predatory-like when you're talking about the trafficking of children, even with college-age girls. The Romeo pimp is what we call them, where, they get into relationships with these young women and they groom them. And a lot of the young girls in college start out in the club, in the strip club, dancing. And then it turns into something else. They go to the VIP room or the champagne room, and then, once they get you to do it one time, especially if they have it on film, without you knowing it, they pretty much have it under your thumb, And then you have a lot of girls college-age girls that you have their, drugs are being placed into their drinks. Mm-hmm. Things are being done to them. It's being recorded. They're not aware. And then they'll use that to blackmail these girls into the sex trafficking business.
So it occurs through a subtle emotional bond, and then suddenly you're in bondage somewhere.
Right, yeah.
And in an abandoned building somewhere. I was looking at the news, and they were saying that a lot of these traffickers are operating out of abandoned buildings that police won't go into. So does that mean that human trafficking is mostly prominent in some of the poorer areas of the city, or is it just everywhere that this is happening?
No, that's not true. It's happening everywhere. And when you're saying abandoned buildings, you're talking about homes that have been abandoned. There are homes that have been abandoned mm-hmm. in very upscale neighborhoods as well, where people they use the word squatting. Well, they will just come in and take over the house, and mm-hmm. they would make it their own. So, and that happens in urban neighborhoods, it happens in low economic neighborhoods, it happens in suburban neighborhoods where people have just abandoned the house and it's there and people will just move in and take over the house. So it doesn't just happen in low socioeconomic areas, and that's another myth that I like to destroy. People think that this thing is specific to socioeconomic standing and color, much like they thought of that with domestic violence years ago. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. That only poor women and women of color were being beaten by their husbands, which is not true. There is no profile. Anyone's acceptable. Anyone can fall prey to this travesty, this crime against humanity.
So it seems like we're debunking a lot of myths right now that could be, very beneficial to learn about. Mm-hmm. What are some other myths that we could, debunk now that people usually that people usually say about human trafficking that are not true or that we should clear up? Do you know of any you could think of?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. A few of them would be that trafficking victim will ask for help. That is absolutely not true. You have to understand that there are a lot of dynamics that go into a person being trafficked. Sometimes fear. A lot of times fear is used. If the survivor, the victim, is someone of a foreign nationality, they're not going to ask for help. They fear law enforcement. They fear deportation, especially when you have people that are being trafficked from countries where the government is known and the police is known to be corrupt. They have no reason to not believe that the government and the police where they are now are corrupt. When you talk about someone that has been sex trafficked and blame themselves for allowing it to happen, that person is not going to come forth. And a lot of people don't even want to be identified as a victim. So the myth that a person that is a victim of trafficking will come forth and seek help is absolutely not true. Another myth that traffickers are always men, absolutely not true. I've been involved in cases where parents have been charged with trafficking their children. We've had female pimps, we've had male pimps, we've had grandmothers that were pimps. So there is no profile for a pimp, just like there's no profile, or a trafficker, just like there's no profile for a victim. Another myth that it only happens in third world countries. Ridiculous. If you visit the National Resource Center for Human Trafficking, their website, it'll tell you that we have an issue here in the United States because California is number 1, Texas is number 2, and Florida is number 3. So it's not just happening in third world countries. And if you look at the numbers of those being trafficked, the numbers of those being trafficked are U.S. citizens. Are there foreign victims being trafficked? Absolutely. But the number of U.S. citizens being trafficked outnumber the number of foreign people that are being trafficked. So that's another myth that we need to look at.
So the issue is here in our backyard.
The issue is here in our backyard. That's right.
And what can we do to help with this issue?
Well, first of all, this is great what we're doing here now, talking about it, bringing awareness, educating. getting involved with organizations that are working with bringing education and awareness about human trafficking, getting involved with organizations that are providing services to those who have survived trafficking, being willing and being able to see something and say something. This is some of the things that we can do, becoming educated about the situation so that when you do see something, you know exactly what you're looking at, and you're able to make an intelligent, conscious decision to contact the human trafficking hotline and report it.
Mm-hmm. If you see something, say something.
Absolutely.
What are some guidelines or some
of the signs?
Some of the signs that this is going on around us.
Well, like I said, it depends on the particular victim, because you're dealing with foreign and domestic victims. So when you're talking about signs of a domestic victim, you're talking about people that are working extended hours. They're not in control of their documents. They're not in control of their pay. You may see bruises on them. They don't speak the language. They can't give you an accurate address of where they live. Someone is always speaking for them. There's always a third party involved. When you're talking about signs of domestic victims, you're talking about a change in their behavior. You're talking about a change in the circle of friends that they're hanging around. You're talking about the change in the types of activities that they're doing. You're talking about what type of jobs they're taking, these so-called modeling jobs, or these, so-called escort services and things like that. Dancing now, they're becoming dancers now. Mm-hmm. Tattoos are a huge sign, because traffickers like to brand their victims. And a lot of times that's how we identify survivors, by their tattoos. So that's also a sign of trafficking. Bruises as well is also a sign that someone may be in a situation where not that they're being trafficked, or just in a domestic abuse. And sometimes domestic abuse and human trafficking can correlate. Not often, but sometimes they do. Mm-hmm. If you have a trafficker that has the person living with them in the home. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, so it depends. And those are just some of the things that you can look for.
Okay, and that's for someone on the outside of the
Mm-hmm.
situation. Let's say I'm being trafficked. Unfortunately, I've gotten into the system. Mm-hmm. What can you say to me to get out of this situation?
Well, first of all, when you're in working and talking with human trafficking victims, like I said, first of all, the person has to identify themselves as a victim. They have to, and they have to have the courage to stand up and say, okay, I want out of this. Also, there's a number that you can call, mm-hmm. which is 1-888-3737-888. That is the number to the human trafficking hotline, the federal human trafficking hotline, 1-888-3737-888. Or you can text to Polaris, which is, I believe it's 3737 for the Polaris Project. If you are in a situation like you stated, try to find someone that that you trust, which is a hard thing to say, because sometimes traffickers will use the the deception that they have everybody working for them. I would suggest that someone, and I always suggest them, go to law enforcement. Go to law enforcement, because the one amazing thing about this state, the state of Florida, is that Attorney General Pam Bondi has put so many things in place and there's so much legislation that has been passed that is requiring law enforcement to undergo human trafficking training. And so I urge survivors to contact law enforcement, contact the hotline. And if you do that here in this state, mm-hmm. you're going to receive help.
So acknowledging it, like I did. Like I said, I was a victim in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
First you have to acknowledge it, and then seek out the help.
Right.
And what's that number again? Can you say
the number for the federal human trafficking hotline is 1-888-3737-888. 1-888-3737-888.
All right. Anything else you would like to discuss?
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Human Rights and Human wrongs. My name is Edward Gills, and this is
Jumorrow Johnson.
And we thank you guys for being here. I hope this information was very useful to you, and have a wonderful day.